Welcome, everybody. I've heard I'm the reason, or I'm here, but you won't be on coffee break or tea break because we are shortening the whole agenda. So I'm sorry for that. But hopefully, after I have done my presentation, there's time for a quick leg stretch. I'm a bit excited. I'm from Germany. I think together with Paul, we're the only kind of non-native speakers. So I can only encourage you, if you don't get what I'm trying to say, could be because of my bad language, please let me show. Just raise your hand, ask the question, don't hesitate. This is a topic which might not be very relevant yet in Africa or South Africa. At least the figures that I've tried to understand from the South African market show me it's a bit slow, but there is an uptake. So there's exactly one slide about South Africa. At least, I would say, so hopefully that's okay for you. I just show you a bit about EVs. How did they evolve in Europe? Why do they have to evolve in Europe? And what Geotab products are actually, at this point of time, already capable in doing. So it's a bit of an overview about everything. I hope you'll enjoy it. Let's get started. There was a famous person, maybe you once heard the name, that was the CEO of this Daimler-Benz, Mercedes-Benz area, and he gave this quote, "Sooner or later something is coming out." And our belief is that this has started now in Europe, so in 2019, 2020, latest, there will be a significant ramp up. Right now, as we speak, there is this so-called IAA event in Frankfurt that was one of the biggest motor shows. It still is big, not sure if it's still that popular, but right now the OEMs are releasing a massive amount of new models. Not yet for sale, but they have the plans. So this will come. What is electric mobility in Europe at this point of time? I show you a few, and I call them niches. So camper vans, electric buses, the street scooters or the kickboards are extremely popular and already under heavy discussion. There are electric motorbikes, there are pedelecs. I've seen the electric buggy for the kids already connected to an app. So obviously everybody is trying to find his niche. This is the cool thing I've seen last year. It's not yet in production, but it will come to production. It's the volocopter for 2 to 4 people. I'm looking forward to that. But that's not what we are going to talk about. We're going back to passenger cars, maybe some light commercial vehicles as well. How many vehicles do we have in Europe? 300 million. How many inhabitants do we have roughly in Europe? 228 million as far as I know. And you see on the left-hand side, this graph, it's a bit difficult to see, but you see, depending on the country, how many vehicles there are per 1,000 people. And the amount is quite high. So we have about 268 million passenger cars and about 40 million kind of trucks. Quite a bit of vehicles on the road. Average age, about 11 years. 11 to 13 years, and that seems to be the kind of lifespan we're talking about. There is certainly a need for change, and I had the pleasure to talk about the topic air quality in one of the breakout sessions. The vehicles, the internal combustion engines, are part of the air quality problem that we are suffering from, and there are certain incidents and there are certain figures across the world. I think I usually like to share this one. There are about estimates that 400,000 premature deaths happened in 1 year only in the European Union. So it's premature deaths, that could be everything, and people can debate whether this is due to air pollution or not, but this is a figure that has been shared. 400,000 is 10 times the number of people killed in road accidents at the same time. So road accidents, yes, an issue. Maybe the air around us is a bigger issue. The situation is more or less Here, a quick overview. Cars account for about 12% of the total emissions. There are different legislations which are in place. 2015 legislation is now being moved into the 2020. 2020 will go into the 2030. And what does it mean? And maybe let's have a quick look into that before we go to the next slide. The 2015 target, somehow we managed to achieve that already by 2013. So the OEMs made a drastic improvement with regards to the efficiency of the vehicles, and the whole exhaust systems were really becoming much better. Now there are small kind of industry areas which a lot of complex technology inside. The next target, which will start next year, will have another massive reduction of CO2 emission, down to 95 grams per kilometer. 95 is really low, comparing that they managed to decrease 20 grams over the last 10 years only. And now we're on average by 120. So next year, we'll have to go down to 95. That's not going to happen. And that's one of the biggest drivers for introducing EVs into the fleet. That, of course, is always an average. So you will have good boys, you have bad boys. If the average is okay, you're fine. If the average is not okay, excuse my French, you're screwed. Let's have a look at this. Why is that? For every car that is going to have a higher emission, the car manufacturer will have to pay per gram, 95 euro. And there was a funny guy who came up with that list. I love that list. So VW, for instance, if they continue like they are today, they would have to pay in 2021 a bit of money. And I don't think they want to do that. So there are the strategies, and the strategy is relatively simple. Hey, we're going to release zero emission cars because they count 0 CO2 per kilometer, right? And if we do that, then we might achieve a mix of the fleets. And that's exactly what's going to happen. So calculations say they need about 20%, 25% of the fleet has to be an EV, and then they are going to, according to that graph, either succeed or not succeed. And now, again, whether this graph is telling us the truth or not, it's from a recent one, and you see if you're going to buy a Honda or a Mitsubishi, then maybe this part of the OEM is more on the lower area, whereas if you buy some other stuff, you will be on the safer side. Yeah? So I guess sooner or later, this will have some implications on decisions, what the OEMs are going to do, how they are going to partner up. I think the biggest surprise for me in the last recent month was an announcement of 2 OEMs going into one partnership. So VW and Mercedes-Benz decided to form a partnership, a cooperation. That has never happened before. They were always kind of separate because they always knew we can do it better than you can do it. And that has changed. So this is a very, very important sign on the way forward. And we also believe from Geotab point of view that this kind of cooperation idea will continue and will even become stronger. So there's another slide just showing that the decline in CO2 and the way we test it, and that's maybe another question, how do we test the CO2 emission? WLTP is the latest one. Is it good enough? We don't know. There's a company in UK who are trying to come up with a stamp per vehicle for an independent road testing, and I've seen figures I didn't know before. Very interesting. If they succeed, then this graph will change as well, because then on top of WLTP, you will also have some independent road testing. So let's jumpstart then the electrification, and in the whole mindset, That was a slow but a steady development, and the whole environmental area has been picked up by all the political parties. There are declarations not of independency but of electrification. There are governments who are really willing to ban fossil emissions completely. The question is, can they really go through this? But it's good that they have plans, and you see, for instance, Norway, not a member of the European Union, by the way, wants to achieve that by 2025, and then Netherlands, always very progressive, UK, and even India by 2030. The sales are rising, as I said in the very beginning. We have passed 1 million 2 years ago already, and now by 2020, more than 4.5. Remember the figure of the European Union, 268 million vehicles. Any idea how many electric vehicles belong to this figure, percentage-wise? 2? No? 7.5%. September 2019 values, I just saw them. And last year, 3%. And the year before, 1.5%, 2%. So since 2018, something has happened. What is it? First of all, it's the fact that population believes hybrids are maybe not the choice to go for. Having the alternative for electrical vehicles was not there, but is coming now. And you will see that the number of sales with regards to plug-in hybrids or those hybrids like the Toyotas that we have seen so far, they might not continue to rise, they actually start to decrease, whereas pure battery electric vehicles, they will continue to rise. A quick overview on the countries. Exemplary, Norway, Germany, and the Netherlands. Despite the fact that Norway is not on the list, it is such a great and impressive figure that I wanted to show it to you. So let's have a quick look at the models. Tesla is on the rise, so obviously the Model 3 is really popular. The Renault Zoe, nevertheless, and that's good because that's on the low-cost end, whereas the Tesla is, it is an expensive car. But the Renault Zoe, in the second and now third generation soon, is a bestseller in net sales. There are now 3 graphs trying to figure out what is is there a dependency? Can you forecast when a country will be successful in selling EVs or utilizing EVs? Is it related to the income? Is it related to the environment? Is it related to anything? So let's have a look, because there's maybe one takeaway after those 3 slides. So first of all, here on that slide on the left-hand side, you see the market share of EVs, and the more it blue, the higher the share. So you see the small country Norway. They have an impressive amount of EVs. Would anybody know why Norway is such a high EV country? They are incentivized extremely. They are extremely rich. So Norway is an oil country. They have quite a high level of income, but absolutely Norway is one of the countries incentivizing EVs. Is that the reason? Well, we don't really know yet, but for sure is that if we only look here at the GDP, yes, you could say high GDP, high EV coverage, and for Norway that's correct, but for the second and the third countries, no, that's not correct. So both Germany, Sweden, and the Netherlands, 2, 3, and 4, they have high GDP values, but the uptake is still far behind Norway. Is there a correlation, for instance, between the EV sales and the number of charging points? Because without charging, EVs is also a bit of a difficult situation. And in that graph, you can see that there are, I think it's 76%, 76% of all the charging points across Europe are in 4 countries. Those 4 countries make exactly 27% of the whole landmass of the EU. So is the number of charging points an indicator whether EV sales are successful or not? Yes and no, I would say. but it's not a clear indicator. And let's have a look at the third one. The third one actually shows the countries in the European Union that incentivize EVs and those which don't. And you can see that Germany, Netherlands, UK, and Sweden, and unfortunately Norway is not on this map because Norway doesn't belong to the European Union, but they do incentivize. Obviously, that is a driver. Why? Yeah, possibly at the end of the day it's money and nothing else at this point of time. I hope it will change. So the conclusion is more or less, at the end of the day, introduction of EVs is possibly connected to incentivization in the beginning, to just kickstart the pickup. Good. And then, as I said, one slide in Africa. So I think the figure is from July, so it's 201 EVs in South Africa. It is the Nissan Leaf. Very interesting, it was the BMW i3 and the i8, and the i8 for me is kind of a super sports car you can buy. I didn't know that you had so many here in South Africa. Only recently now I heard that the Jaguar I-Pace and also the Land Rover have been released. Now these are plug-in hybrids. Then again, in theory, plug-in hybrids are not the choice for the future if you have to cover those CO2 thresholds. Good. And now, what's the bridge? What is Geotab offering? And I guess you have heard it. Maybe you haven't utilized it yet. I have heard it as well. I haven't utilized it either. Reason for that is relatively simple. Geotab has started, and Colin mentioned this morning in his great presentation. We acquired Fleet Karma. Fleet Karma brought in tons of knowledge about electric vehicles, including products that are currently being integrated into my Geotab. And two areas are at the moment within the roadmap. The first one is, how do we enable fleets to go electric? What can we do? How can we persuade the guys on the other side of the table, hey, that is an added value, that is the sort of consultancy I want to give to you. And once they have got it, then of course they need to operate it. So how can we help them within the Geotab product solution to operate this? So first let's go electric, and going electric is strongly connected to the so-called EVSA, that's the Electric Vehicle Suitability Assessment. And that electric suitability assessment is currently being integrated as an add-in into my Geotab. I'm not 100% sure whether it's going to be released, but it's supposed to be soonish. And there will be different parameters will be fed into this EVSA. Kilometer range, price range, total cost of ownership, environmental factors, etc. And at the end of the day, there will be a resume highlighting potential areas within the fleet where you can either utilize an EV for a better price even, or you might want to utilize the EV because you can replace the combustion engine, but you might not win too much from an economical point of view, or there are areas within the fleet where it just doesn't make sense to replace it right now. Factors like range, factors like availability, because of weather and environmental factors could be impacting this. And then you get kind of out of the calculation, it shows you, okay, for your fleet, Mr. XYZ, for instance, you have two options, the Nissan NV200 or the Nissan Leaf. Both are on that price range. Both would help you to achieve potential savings of X over a number of years. And that is the core of the EVSA. Right now it's a manual task, which we're already doing, so we have run pilots. We have run pilots across Europe with interested partners as well, with customers, and got more feedback, and now we're doing the final touches. So step one done, step two. What do we do now? Well, we want to see the information. And what kind of information do we get? Any idea what kind of special engine data, for instance, an EV could provide us with? Anything of interest? Yeah, what we're usually, first thing we're interested in, what is the battery level? Because what I want to avoid is that in the morning I give a key to the driver and the driver opens the door and, 0%. So state of charge is something that, of course, we want to read. Then, of course, we would also, sorry? Yeah, exactly. So we want to combine that. We want to come up with interesting and relevant reports, of course. And how would it look like? Right now, it's still on the preview server. But what you can see, I'm not sure if this is working, here. Hey, suddenly in your list, when you click on the map, you have additional symbols. And in these symbols, you can either see what's the battery level, you can see whether it's being charged or not, and there will be more information being added. So we're currently seeing in the engine data that we have the information about engine currency coming in, currency being taken out, voltage levels, etc., etc. So some very interesting reports are out there to come up in the future. With that, we know what's the range, we know can we utilize it. We of course then want to have a wider look. Are there charging stations available? And if these charging stations available, how long might it take for me to recharge a car? I don't need 100%, but maybe I only need 70 or 50% because I have a route in front of me after lunch which takes me about 80 kilometers. And this is going to be an optimized process. It has to be, because if you want to juggle 10 electric vehicles in your fleet, that's one thing. 100 is becoming more difficult. 1,000 is going to be impossible to do this with pen and paper. So also that is for us an important aspect. Europe is going to lead in the EV introduction. That is clear at the moment. US is behind us. China is a different animal. They have higher sales, but they just work differently. So at the moment, we focus on the on the European operations. And if we get this right, then we have a nice way of approaching customers and making sure that all of us can more or less contribute and get the benefits out of this. So, that is more or less then my conclusion of today. In short, the EV introduction is definitely difficult. I've been watching it now for 8-9 years. All I'm doing is driving an electric bicycle. I don't have an EV yet, but my son has one, so I'm happy for him. We are now at a tipping point. We are about to, I think the OEMs have counted 60 new models which are coming out now, including, well, every OEM. Whether it's VW, whether it's Mercedes, all of them are throwing out the new models. The range, nevertheless, continues to be a challenge. Like 300 kilometers, 400 kilometers, it depends on the use case. It really depends, and that's also what the EVSA is considering it. The charging infrastructure has to be built up in parallel. And that's going to be an interesting endeavor, I would say, because I've been talking to utilities, asking them whether they would utilize EVs already today in their fleet. And they said, go away. We would need to build up transformators. We would have to spend a lot of money. I guess I was talking to the wrong management level in these utilities because I couldn't believe that this was the answer, but this discussion is not over yet. And with this, I hope that I could give you a bit of an introduction into the EV topic in Europe. Thank you very much for your attention.